Well, that's why they play the Brawl. That's why the Brawl is great. That's why we all miss the Brawl. That's why we all wish the Brawl had never gone away. That's why conference realignment sucks. Because it took the Brawl away from us. And the tone of this year Panther-Lair Post-Game show might have been a little bit different if Pitt had not pulled out the win, but they did pull out the win and emerged victorious 38-31 over West Virginia at Acrisure Stadium here on Thursday night. It's now early Friday morning, very late, 1:35 a.m. We're doing the Panther-Lair Post-Game because how could we not? I mean, we talked about it all week about doing a post-game show, a live post-game show in the aftermath of the game. And I think sometimes I went back and forth on it. I liked the idea. I wanted to do it no matter what. But I went back and forth a little bit. Should we really do a post-game show at 1:30 in the morning? But then that game happened. And I said, how could I not? How could we not do a live post-game show after a game with 7 lead changes, 4 ties? Never was the score separated by more than 7 points at any point throughout the game. I mean, this was almost everything you want from the Backyard Brawl. It really was. And if the first half was a little slow, first half was a little sloppy, first half saw both teams sort of struggling to find their footing, making mistakes, not really playing all that well, 10 points each, 10-10 tie at halftime. The second half certainly made up for it. We have 7 touchdowns in the second half. And you might have been on the edge of your seat. You might have been feeling pretty bad about the game. You might have been feeling like, well, this is a guaranteed loss. And boy, all that talk that we had this offseason is all going down the tubes. And I mean, I will admit that I was maybe feeling that same way as well. I was having those same thoughts of, wow, genius. Good thing you predicted 10-2 for this team when they're going to come out of the week 1 with a loss. I mean, I never like to write a game off. You never know what can happen. You never know. It could look like you're sunk. It could look like you have no chance. It could look like all your hopes are lost. And then a ball tips off a receiver's hands right into a defensive back's hands. And that defensive back just happens to be a guy who's really, really fast. And he can cut through all those offensive linemen and get to the end zone for a win. Of course, that's what happened tonight. MJ Devonshire putting the exclamation point on it with the game-winning interception, a 56-yard return. That in some ways, I felt like it was a karmic handoff, for the play earlier in the game when JT Daniels threw a pass. He was close to his own end zone, threw a pass. It was deflected up in the air. It goes flying in the air, and there's like 4 Pitt defensive backs around this ball, all lining up, getting ready. And Bryce Ford Wheaton comes jumping out of nowhere and makes the catch. That seemed like a turning point catch at that point. Now, I don't think West Virginia scored on that drive, as opposed to the MJ Devonshire tipped interception where he scored on a 56-yard return. So not entirely a fair trade-off, but kind of perfect for the Brawl. Isn't it perfect that we have plays like that in the Backyard Brawl? Isn't it perfect that you might not have liked it, but JT Daniels is basically falling down in the end zone, just throws up a prayer, and ends up being caught for a first down? Isn't it perfect that you have things like, and this is a play that was probably forgotten because it was so deep in the first half, but at one point, West Virginia was on the field and they either subbed or forgot to bring a guy out and only had 10 men on the field, but they sent out a late sub. And because the offense subbed, Pitt got to sub. The defense got to sub as well. And so Pitt, seeing this opportunity, sent Kalijah Cansey into the game as a late defensive sub. Sent him in very slowly until he finally got in there and tapped Tyler Bentley and said, here, I'll replace you now. Meanwhile, the play clock is ticking, and West Virginia has to blow a timeout. I think that was in the first half. That play seems so long ago. But that kind of gamesmanship, it just seems perfect for the Brawl. It should be a game that goes back and forth like this game did. It should be a game with 7 lead changes and 4 ties, and the score never being more than a touchdown apart. That's what the Backyard Brawl should be. It should have 70,000 people screaming and rocking so much that the press box was swaying. Now, I felt that a few times over the course of the last 17 years that I've been going to that press box to cover Pitt football games. But never quite like I felt it tonight. And, if that interception that wasn't had actually been an interception, the place would have rocked like crazy. And when the officials finally announced that last catch at the 1 yard line was overturned, thus turning the ball over on downs, giving the ball to Pitt, and effectively ending the game, that place was rocking. And the press box was swaying in a way that, there were a few guys there who mostly covered the Steelers, and they were saying, like, they were acting like they had not experienced that before. They had not felt that before. It was that kind of night. Biggest crowd to ever watch a sporting event in Pittsburgh, ever. Not just Pitt, Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, all those things. Biggest crowd to ever watch a sporting event in Pittsburgh. And it was there tonight at Acrisure Stadium. And it felt like the biggest crowd. That place was packed. That place was rocking. And anybody who was there, whoever questions the kind of atmosphere you can generate at Heinz Field, generate at Acrisure Stadium, you saw it tonight. You saw it in this game of what that place can truly be when it's packed and people are into it and people are excited and there's great energy like there was for that game. Of course, it ends up being a Pitt victory, but and certainly a lot of the noise came from the Pitt fans. I'll definitely give credit to the West Virginia fans. West Virginia fans showed up. Not 75% of the stadium, because that was never going to happen, and that was asinine. I went off on this on Tuesday night during our live show. I ranted about it on Twitter as well. I mean, it was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, that West Virginia was going to have 75% of the fans in the stadium. It defies all reason and logic, and I think if you believed that even for a moment, if you even considered it to be plausible, you need to have your head checked, because that's insane. And it was never going to be that. It was never going to be a 50-50 split. It was probably never even going to be 60-40. At best, 75-25 in Pitt's favor, and I think it was even less than that. I think it was probably 80-20. But the West Virginia fans were there, no question, and they were loud. And props to them for showing up, which I knew they would do. They always have shown up when games are being played in Pittsburgh between these two teams. But it was never going to be 75-25. But it was fun when West Virginia did good things, when they scored their touchdowns. There was audible, there was noise. It was loud. And I think that inspired Pitt fans to get even louder when Pitt did good things. And sometimes you felt like you had to wait for those good things to happen. But they did happen. And yeah, there was a lot for Pitt fans to get loud about in this game. I don't know where we start with talking about this. Maybe we can just even go to the comments and questions. Remember, you can post your comments and questions there in the chat screen. If you want to be a super chatter, make sure your comment gets read or your question gets answered. You can do that. Throw a couple bucks to the podcast. I'll start off with that. We'll get to the super chatters first off, because you guys are the best. Joe New says, if we don't adjust, more punts will be blocked. All right, we're definitely going to have to talk about the punt situation. Matt Durney is a super chatter. I got to look for your comments. Like I said on Tuesday, on to Tennessee, never doubt talent wins out. Yeah. So, all right, Joe, I'll start with the punt situation. All right, because you really saw a lot of different sides of Pitt's punting situation. And we talked about the punter and how this might be an area of concern because we hadn't seen Sam Vanderhaar really just boom a big kick in training camp. And he really didn't boom a big kick in this game. He had one blocked. He had one where he rolled out to his left, where Pitt left basically nobody blocking on the right side because he rolled out to his left. And it went like 37 yards. And he had another punt that rolled all the way down to like the 1 and actually worked out pretty well. That's going to be a work in progress. I mean, he's shown that he can kick with both legs. And so that gives them some versatility to get kind of cute with the punting game. But I feel like that's going to be, I don't know if the gimmick is going to wear off. And I'm not sure how long you can sustain, your punt game like that if you're kind of relying on gimmicks. I'm not sure that's the best plan going forward, to be gimmicky like that. But that I think that's what they have to work with. I think Sam Vanderhaar is the punter this year, and that's what he can do. And I don't mean to say gimmicky in a derogatory way, but sometimes you'd like to just boom a big hanging punt. Now, Pat Narduzzi said they talk about artificial hang time. I think that's the word he used. And I think he's talking about Sam Vanderhaar being able to roll out and buy extra time for the coverage units to get downfield while he's rolling out before he kicks. I mean, that's cool. We'll see how it works out. People know this is what you do now. It's on tape. I don't know if you have other wrinkles that you haven't shown or didn't show in this game, but it's on tape now that this is what you can do with this particular punter. We'll have to see how that progresses over the course of the season. All right, a couple big things from this game before we get into the comments and questions. My thoughts on this game. And there's two sides to it. There's offense and there's defense. Offense, I think particularly early on, there were definitely signs of things to be concerned about. And actually, I mean, extended throughout the whole game. The blocking wasn't great. The blocking for Kedon Slovis wasn't great. Kedon Slovis didn't necessarily react to the pressure well. He didn't read or feel the pressure well, and he didn't respond well when it got there. He had a nice long scramble on one play, but really, he looked like he was pretty frozen in the pocket, and he ended up hanging onto the ball too long. He had 5 sacks, and I would say at least 2 or 3, if not more, were just a result of him holding onto the ball too long. And you got to a point late in might have even actually been I think it was in the fourth quarter, where he had multiple sacks on the same drive, the drive before they scored the game-tying touchdown, talking about in a second. But he had multiple sacks for like 20 total lost yards. They ended up on a 4th and 30 or something like that because he was just holding onto the ball. He dropped back, and I think he was shook. I think he was a little bit frozen. I think he was a little bit like a deer in headlights. And I worried at that point about like what he was really going to be and what he was really going to be able to do. Now he comes back on the next drive. They get the ball at the 8, and they drive 92 yards in 7 plays to score a touchdown. So he apparently wasn't shook. We'll get to the positive side in a second. I think, particularly in the first half, but really throughout this game, there was a real feeling out process. Slovis feeling out his offensive line, the offensive line feeling out Slovis, the running backs and O-line kind of feeling each other out. And maybe most importantly, Frank Cignetti feeling out Kedon Slovis and these offensive players and what kind of stuff actually works for them. And I think it took them into the second half, maybe well into the second half, maybe even to the fourth quarter, to really kind of get a handle on what they could do well. There was a little bit of a personnel issue, I guess. Pat Narduzzi said after the game that Carter Johnson is in the hospital. The tight end who came in as a junior college transfer. He was a defensive tackle at TCU. He's in the hospital with an infection. Now, Pat Narduzzi expects him to be back, but he said that changed some of their plans personnel-wise, and I think that was part of the reason they ended up going more all the 6 offensive linemen that you saw, 7 offensive linemen at times. Ryan Jacoby was out there as an extra lineman, playing tight end, but essentially an extra offensive lineman a lot. And Jake Cradle was out there a lot, playing fullback, playing extra lineman as a tight end. And Pat Narduzzi said some of that stuff was they kind of had to go to it because they didn't have Carter Johnson available to do the things they wanted to do with him. So maybe that threw a little bit of a wrench into it. I just feel like there were some first game jitters, some first game rust. They just weren't smooth. You know what I mean? And I think that is the players on the field. I think it's the coaches as well. I don't think it looked like a first game. And if your first game is against UMass or it's Youngstown State or Villanova or Albany, you can do things like that. You can get settled in like that. But when you're playing Virginia like they did 3 years ago or West Virginia like they did this year, you don't necessarily have any time to settle in. You don't have a game. You don't have 4 quarters to just kind of tinker around and get comfortable on the field. You got to be ready to go. And they weren't. It wasn't clicking. And West Virginia really wasn't either. I think it took West Virginia a little while into the second half before they figured out, hey, we have this 240-pound freshman that we list as a tight end, and apparently we can hand the ball off to him, and he's going to run for 125 yards and a touchdown on 7 carries. And that, we might as well just skip over to that. You got to fix the run defense. You cannot have a run defense like Pitt had tonight and expect to be successful this year. Not with how much the coaches put on the run defense. And I really think that when West Virginia tried to run to the middle, Pitt was pretty successful. It was really the runs outside. And Pat Narduzzi talked about that after the game, and he pointed to the fact that they had 2 new starters at outside linebacker. And my optimism and bullishness had really grown for those outside linebackers over the course of training camp. But I think we saw that they looked like first-time starters. Bengali Kamara looked like a first-time starter at times, particularly in the run fits, and Shane Simon did too. And Pat Narduzzi pointed to those guys specifically. They looked like they were playing for the first time, and they weren't, they didn't fit the way they needed to fit, and you end up with these wide running lanes for C.J. Donaldson, and he ends up with, like I said, 125 yards. Pitt doesn't give up 190 rushing yards on the reg. That's not what they do. Their defense, on the contrary, is built to specifically not do that. It's supposed to be the bread and butter. We've talked all the time about how focused they are on stopping the run, and it ends up giving up a lot in the passing game. But at least if you can stop the run, you've got that going for you. Well, they couldn't do that tonight. And I think it was those outside runs. Now, I am confident that Pat Narduzzi, Randy Bates, and Ryan Manilak can find solutions to those problems. Narduzzi, the way he talked after the game, seemed very confident that he knew what went wrong and seemed to feel confident that they could solve some of those problems. But that's a huge problem. I thought JT Daniels played well. I thought he threw the ball well. I think he looks like a good quarterback, and I think actually West Virginia has a chance to win some games this year. Number 0 is really good. Number 13 is good. Number 3 is good. They have some good receivers. They have some good weapons, and I think the quarterback is good. Tonight, in this game, their best bet was running the ball. And quite frankly, the interception that MJ Devonshire had, I'm not sure why you're not continuing to pound the ball in that situation. It's probably the best bet because that's what was working best for West Virginia at that point in the game. So that's a big thing that Pitt has to get figured out. You cannot go forward with the run defense looking like it did and giving up the plays that it gave up. You're obviously going to need more out of Hava Baldonado and Kalijah Cansey. Let's get out their stats real quick just to see where they finished. Baldonado had 3 tackle assists and half of a tackle for loss. Cansey had 5 tackles, 3 solo, 2 assists, and 1 tackle for loss. And 2 quarterback hurries he was credited with. So not as MIA as I think it felt during the game. I think you expected Kalijah Cansey to make a big impact, and he maybe didn't make as big of an impact as we expected. I think both of those guys, I've little to no concern about Cansey and Baldonado. I think those guys are both going to be fine. I'm far more encouraged by what John Morgan did. John Morgan goes 4 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, and 2 quarterback hurries. That dude was making plays, and he quite frankly should have had a sack on that last drive. They ruled that JT Daniels' knee was not down, and the sack went like a yard later to like David Green and somebody else, I forget who. But John Morgan played great in this game. He played really, really well, and I think that bodes well because he's a guy who I feel like has been on the cusp for the last few seasons of really breaking out. And if he keeps playing like he did against West Virginia, he is going to break out. And so you get him with Baldonado and Cansey. I thought Deion Hayes played a good game. The other tackles, Green, Danielson, Bentley, just Jules, they just did what they do. They work inside. Desmond Alexander got hurt late in the game. We'll see what his status is going forward. The way he left the game and went straight to the locker room does not seem good, but we'll find out. I think, and even the defensive backs, A.J. Woods left the game and did not return. I'm not sure if he got hurt. I have to go back and look and see if there was a spot where he clearly came off the field in pain or something like that. But I thought the DBs were okay. Rashad Battle got beat on a touchdown. Woods got beat on a touchdown. But Devonshire obviously had the interception and finished with 2 tackles. Marquez Williams had 2 tackles also, including a tackle for loss. I thought he did tackle well. He had the forced fumble where he's getting blocked with one hand and he reach out and swipes the ball out with the other. It was a really nice play by him. I thought Hallett and Hill Aside from Brandon Hill having a couple penalty situations, I thought those guys played well. It's really, and of course, Servasi Dennis was, outstanding. 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. A quarterback hurry. He played well. He had a big sack late in the game. Bengali Kamara, for whatever I'm saying about him, did lead the team in tackles with 8. He had 6 solo tackles and 2 pass breakups he was credited with. So he showed some flashes, but him and Shane Simon are going to have to elevate their play, which was something we kind of talked about in general with this team, that, in this opener, it was probably going to be a little sloppy. There was going to be feeling out period, of a settling in period, which, again, you have a better opportunity for that when you're playing Albany and Villanova than when you're playing West Virginia and you're bringing back the Backyard Brawl. Positives, and I do think that, I think Morgan was a big positive. I think the defensive backs played pretty well overall. Actually, before I talk positives, I gotta say, and I'm curious, I'll jump into the comments section here soon to see what people are saying about this, but I feel like we're going to have a really polarizing situation here, polarizing conversations, and a very polarized Pitt fan base over the next 10 days or 8 days, since now it's September 2nd, and the next game's on the 10th. Over the next 8 days, we're going to have very polarizing conversations about Kedon Slovis. Was he good or was he not? Because even after the game, in the middle of the game, I understand. You get people posting like crazy, wow, they need to replace the quarterback, he stinks, put in Patty, do this, do that. But after the game, when you look at the whole body of work, it's interesting to me that as I was looking at the message boards and looking at Twitter, there's still some very, very divergent opinions about how Kedon Slovis played in this game. And I got to tell you, when I was sitting in the post-game press conference, I was listening to Pat Narduzzi, or maybe Slovis was talking, I forget. But I looked down at the stat sheet, and it was, I was almost kind of surprised to see that Slovis threw for 308 yards. It's like shocking to me. If you ask me, just off the top of your head, hey, Chris, how many yards did Slovis have tonight? I'd have been like, I don't know, 210, 212, something like that. 308 yards, 16 of 24 for 308 yards. He averaged close to 20 yards per completion. That's crazy to me. I never would have thought that. Now, there was a lot of yards after the catch. 158 yards is what was officially credited. Jared Wayne had 50. Rodney Hammond had 53. Izzy Benacana had 21. Bub Means had 18. Kanate Mumfield had 7. Jaden Bradley had 9. So, you got 158 of the 308 receiving yards were recorded after the catch. And that'll probably get brought up a lot. Well, yeah, sure, Slovis had 308 yards, but more than half of that came after the catch. And we say that as if that's a criticism. He still put those receivers in position to make those plays. Now, I'm not going to hold it against the guy if he has good playmakers. And I think we saw tonight that those guys can make plays. Bub Means, for what you want to say, and yeah, he had a fumble and he had a bad drop, but he played pretty well and had a huge block on Rodney Hammond's big run down the sidelines on like that swing pass. Bub Means was key in turning that into a 53-yard gain as opposed to like a 33-yard gain or a 23-yard gain. I think Kanate Mumfield showed how good he's going to be. 5 catches for 71 yards on 8 targets. Jared Wayne is Jared Wayne. And the thing I loved about Jared Wayne tonight, there was the play where Jared Wayne and Jalen Barden ended up in the same place. And that was wrong. I think Pat Narduzzi almost sort of said after the game that he almost kind of put that on Slovis. That Slovis sent a guy in motion that he shouldn't have sent in motion, and then they ran their routes and they ended up in the same spot, and Wayne missed what probably would have been a pretty good completion. And he was very angry after that. And I think that was prior to him having his big catch and run for 50 yards or whatever it was, or 64 yards. What was his long catch? 60-some yards. It's cut off on the sheet here. An angry Jared Wayne, I think, is a good thing for this team. Like a Jared Wayne who's getting fired up and really stepping up in that way and getting on his teammates and getting angry on the field. I think that's a good thing for this offense and a good thing for this team. Mumfield, Wayne, means Jaden Bradley made a nice play. Obviously, if you get the ball to Abanikanda and Hammond, you're going to have a chance of something good happening. And I think that's what Slovis did. He got the ball to his playmakers and gave them an opportunity to make big plays, which they didn't do consistently for 60 minutes, but did enough to score 31 offensive points, or 28 offensive points and set up a field goal. And then obviously get the helpful touchdown from MJ Devonshire. I think we definitely understand the running back rotation right now. Izzy Abanikanda and Rodney Hammond. I mean, I've been saying all summer. I mean, you guys know if you've listened to this podcast, you read what I write or anything like that, you know my feelings on the running backs. You know that I've been saying Rodney Hammond is the best back on the team the whole time. I've been talking about how he's an NFL back, and he's going to probably be a 1,000-yard rusher, probably be the leading rusher in the ACC this year if he gets 20 carries a game. I mean, that's what I've been saying all along, right? Look, I still think Izzy Abanikanda is a big-time playmaker. He showed it on his touchdown catch. He made it happen on that play. But, boy, it's undeniable with Rodney Hammond that when he gets the ball, good things happen. And I don't know if there are different plays being called for Hammond and Abanikanda. I don't know if there's something different in the blocking when one guy versus the other, the plays that they were called tonight. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just man versus man, and Hammond is better. I don't know, but when he gets the ball, good things happen, and they've happened a lot. And whether it's Ryan Jacoby picking him up and carrying him into the end zone, or that swing pass that he takes down the sideline, or just powering his way, you know what I mean? He's a playmaker, and they gave him 16 carries tonight plus 2 receptions. I mean, I think he needs 20 touches a game. I really do. I think Izzy needs 20 touches a game too, although I think it'd be tough to get 2 running backs 20 touches a game each. But it's hard to deny with Rodney Hammond that he makes things happen when he gets the ball, and I think he was definitely one of the positives tonight. 2 touchdowns. How many total yards? 129 total yards of offense, 74 rushing, 55 receiving. 18 touches. He's a playmaker, and he, the way he looked against West Virginia, I mean, he's one of the top 2 or 3 playmakers on the team, right there with Konate Mumfield, and I don't know who else you even put in that category. I think those 2 guys clearly were the best playmakers on the team tonight, offensively, and got to get him the ball more. Got to get the ball to Jared Wayne more, although he had 5 targets, 3 catches. Obviously, the big missing piece in the offense in this game was Gavin Bartholomew. 2 targets, and one of those targets was a throwaway. I mean, they had to credit it to someone, so they credited it to Bartholomew. He catches the only other pass that was thrown to him, and it was a tough catch. He caught it for 9 yards. And Bartholomew has to be part of the offense. And I think there were opportunities to get him the ball, and Slovis either didn't see him or wasn't looking his way. But that's got to change. That has to be a part of the offense going forward, and that's on Frank Signetti calling it up better, and it's on Slovis looking for Bartholomew. He's got a lot of good weapons, a lot of good players to throw to. You got to get it to Bartholomew. I think that's important. All right, I got to get to the comments and questions here. You guys have been posting in the chat screen. We got everybody on the chat tonight. This is awesome. Can't believe how many people we have here. Will is a super chatter. He says, thoughts on how quiet the tight ends were tonight. Do you see Bartholomew and Carter getting more looks against Tennessee? I mean, Bartholomew, yes. Carter, I don't know what they're going to do with Daniel Carter. He got 2 carries for 4 yards. Didn't have any receiving targets. He played quite a bit as a fullback. Didn't line up as a tailback at all. I don't know what they're going to, No, he did have the touchdown run. I don't know. I think it'll be week to week. I think it'll be based on who they're playing and what kind of matchups they think they can get and what they think they can do with those guys kind of week to week. But Bartholomew has to get the ball more. I think hitting Bartholomew more and then hitting some of the deep shots more is just going to loosen up defenses so much that they'll have trouble picking what they want to defend. It's going to be difficult to decide, like, oh, are we going to, we're going to cover deep. We're going to keep an eye on the tight end. We got to stop the run game. We got to watch these out passes and all. We got to watch the swings and the screens. this offense has the potential to be so multifaceted and so versatile and have so many weapons that they can really, I think, attack in a lot of ways. They just, I think Bartholomew is part of that. I forget if I finished the conversation about Slovis being polarizing, though, and I'm sure there are a lot of comments and questions here about that. But, I think there were some first game jitters. I think he was getting comfortable in Frank Cignetti's offense, but I think there were enough moments in this game, for me at least, where I looked and said, that was a really good throw. That was a really good decision. That was a really good play, and enough that I'm excited to see what he can do next week. After a week of reviewing the film and learning from it and getting out there and practicing and Frank Cignetti refining the playbook and the play calls to even better fit what Slovis can do, which I think as I said, I think he was doing later in the game against West Virginia here. I think it really, I'm interested to see how the offense develops, and I'm interested to see how Slovis develops as we move forward here. All right, getting into some comments and questions here. Joe New started it off, said, nice win, lots to work on. I think there absolutely is, Joe. Joe New, I don't disagree about that at all. I mean, I think you're always going to come out of that first game with a lot to work on, and when you're playing a Power 5 non-conference opponent, particularly a rival like West Virginia, you're going to really be put to the test and probably find a lot of things you need to work on. Michael Costa says, beyond excited I took tomorrow off. What a night. Yeah, you got that right. I'm probably going to have some work to do tomorrow, but I'm probably going to try and get a lot done tonight so that I can sleep in a little bit. We'll see what's up. Pitman Zach 94 says, probably didn't open the offensive playbook fully. I don't think they held anything back. I think they probably, I think they had as much of the playbook in as they could. I think they put in a playbook that they felt like they could win with. I don't think they held anything back where they would in previous years, like they play at Villanova in 2016 and hold back probably like 75% of the offense to save it for the Penn State game. I don't think it was a situation like that. I think they put in whatever they felt they would need to win. They didn't always execute it well, and I think they'll go back to the drawing board and look at it and say, probably don't want to try that again. We probably could try this other thing instead. So, I don't think they were hiding anything, but I definitely the offense will evolve over the course of the season. Joe New says Slovis doesn't have a good internal clock. He needs to throw the ball away and live for the next play. I do think there's some element to that. I do think he needs to get rid of the ball quicker. I think JT Daniels did a really good job of getting rid of the ball quickly. I think he needs to have a better feel for his hot reads and needs to have a better feel for, I'm going to get the snap, drop back, 1, 2, 3, balls out. I think you need to, he needs to develop that. And if you didn't have a good feel for it tonight, if you didn't have a good feel for it against West Virginia, then Frank Cignetti needs to do a better job designing it. You know what I mean? He needs to do a better job putting in those hot reads or whatever it is so that Slovis can get the ball out sooner, because that was a problem. He held on the ball too long. I would say at least 3 of his sacks, maybe more, were just a product of him holding on to the ball where he needs to get rid of the ball. And some of that's on him and some of that's on Frank Cignetti. Brock McDonagh says, did you see this performance coming from MJ Devonshire? He looked like a totally different player from last year. I always thought he had potential. I think he was pretty good last year, but I think he was much better this year. He's an older player. He's a more experienced player. He's got a whole year in the defense. He's seen this defense and been a part of it. I think you knew he could be good. It was just a question of how he would do when he got the opportunity to be on the field, and he certainly showed tonight that he can play a lot. And if AJ Woods is out, and like I say, AJ Woods didn't come back after I have to check and see when the last time he played was, but if AJ Woods is out, then Devonshire is going to get a lot more opportunities to show what he can do. Let's see. Daminal 76 says, West Virginia is better than I thought. Our offensive line got their butts whipped all night. Yeah, it wasn't the best night for the O-line. And there are probably a lot of reasons for that. I do think West Virginia has some talented defensive linemen. It wasn't the best night for Pitt's offensive line. They're going to have to get a lot better in pass protection. I mean, on both sides, pass protection and the run. They weren't good enough in either regard. And so, I would agree with you there. I think this offensive line misses Gabe Hoy. I think he could have helped them on the right side tonight. I think there were a lot of things going on. I didn't really care for all the 6 offensive linemen and 7 offensive linemen that they run. And we'll have some stats on this probably on Friday, maybe on Saturday, of when they went with 6 O linemen, when they had Jacoby out there, or when they went to 7 O linemen where they had Jacoby and they brought in Blake Sabovic at right guard and moved Jake Cradle around to tight end or fullback. We'll see how productive those plays actually were, what they ran out of those sets, and how productive they actually were out of those sets. Anecdotally, I don't feel like it helped them all that much. I think you could have done more with, Gavin Bartholomew, 3 receivers and a running back, or Bartholomew, 2 receivers, a running back, and a fullback. I think you could have done more to maybe spread the defense out a little bit and give them more options. Because when you put Jacoby out there, now you really only have 4 eligible players, right? I mean, I don't know if Jacoby's eligible or not, but you're not going to give the ball to him, not in any way that the defense really needs to respect it. And so you're limiting yourself. And then when they would go with Jacoby and Cradle, now you really only have 3 guys. You have 2 receivers and a back, or a receiver and 2 backs that are going to get the ball. I feel like it made it too easy for West Virginia, not necessarily to sniff out the play, but to know, all right, well, there's only 3 guys the ball might go to. And if they want to hand it to Jake Cradle or throw a pass to Ryan Jacoby, go ahead. So I didn't really care for that, and I'm not sure they really benefited from it as much as they were probably hoping to. So if it's me, I'm taking those things out of the playbook, and I'm getting back to, again, 3 receivers, a tight end, and a running back, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 running backs. I want Gavin Bartholomew on the field at all times, and I'm going to give him the ball, and I'm going to have more options that the defense has to account for, because they didn't have to account for 5 when Jacoby's out there or when Cradle's out there. So I'm changing those plays in the playbook. I'm not doing that as much anymore, because I don't think it really benefited them all that much in terms of the blocking. Ryan W. says 2 words, Chris, heart palpitations. Yeah, Ryan, but would you rather have it any other way? It's a backyard brawl. Wouldn't you want it to be an exciting game that goes down to the finish? No, I mean, I'm sure you'd rather have a 52-6 game, but this one, this is what the brawl is supposed to be. Patrick DeSantis says Slovis took sacks, and as much as I got frustrated with him, he never threw a pick. He didn't throw a pick, but he almost did. He had a pick that was caught out of bounds, and that was a close one. That was a mistake that he can't make. But to your point, he threw 24 passes. It took 5 sacks, so he dropped back 29 and scrambled 5 times. So you're talking about 24 plus 34 dropbacks, roughly, and only really had 1 pass that was, you would say, boy, that was a really bad throw. It was close to an interception. He missed guys here and there. I guess the Kanate Mumfield deep shot, the post or whatever he was running, it looked to me like Mumfield kind of tripped up a little bit. Slovis might have overthrown him a little bit too. But I mean, for the most part, aside from that would-be interception, and that Slovis's passes were pretty clean and pretty crisp and pretty sharp, and he really didn't put the ball in danger. You know what I mean? He didn't put the ball in jeopardy. Joe New says we got a new commitment tonight. That's right. We reported this right before the game. Jordan Bass, a linebacker from Phoebus High School in Hampton, Virginia, committed to Pitt. We think he was one of the guys who actually committed over the summer, one of those unclaimed Pat Narduzzi, Pitt is it tweets. But he's a big-time linebacker. He's going to project at that star linebacker position. Virginia Tech was hot on him. North Carolina, Virginia wanted him really bad. Penn State was after him. Maryland, he had a really good offer sheet. And I think he's one of the better linebacker prospects on Pitt's board. He's the guy that Pitt prioritized. He was one of the top prospects on the board at linebacker, and I think they were really excited to land him. So that announcement came out Actually, before the game. We reported it before the game. If you were following us on Twitter and on the message boards, we had it up there. But that's a good commitment there. We'll have more on Bass soon. Let's see. Kevin Ploucha says, overall thoughts, lots of things were shaky, but a win is a win. Over a week to shake the cobwebs off and prep for Tennessee. Yeah, I think it's a good thing to have this game on a Thursday night because you do have that extra time now to work on what you learned from this game. You know what I mean? You get 2 extra days or an extra day or whatever it is. Yeah, 2 extra days to learn from this game, to break it down, to understand why things went awry and or what worked and what didn't and what you need to improve on and what you need to keep doing. Let's see. Scrolling through here. Not going to spend too much more time here because it's late. Mike S. says, I need to bring this up since it seems to be a thing. It started with Khalil Anderson, then today with Izzy Abanikanda and Bengali Kamara. I'm convinced the Chris Peak jinx is real. So you're talking about guys who I hyped up and, maybe, didn't pan out or haven't panned out yet. I'll say that, I hyped up Jordan Addison a lot. But when he was coming in as a freshman, I said he was going to be really, really good. So I got that one right. You got to give me that. I also hyped up Michael Smith. That one didn't work out. Khalil Anderson hasn't gotten on the field yet, so you'll have this. Bengali Kamara, like I said, led the team in tackles. I think he wasn't perfect tonight. I think he did. My biggest gripe with Bengali Kamara, and I don't know the schemes, so I can't say, well, he blew it on this run play or that run play. My biggest gripe with Bengali Kamara tonight is there were a handful of times where he got to the ball carrier and then gave up a couple more yards because he was trying to rip the ball out instead of just making the tackle. I feel like Jordan Whitehead had a problem with that. And I feel like different guys have had a problem with that over the years. And Kamara, I think, wanted to make that splash play on every tackle opportunity. He wanted to get that big fumble. He must have heard that I said he was going to score a couple defensive touchdowns this season. He wanted to make those big splash plays and the forced fumble and all that stuff when he just needed to make the tackle. He just needed to get guys to the ground. And so, right now, he's the team's leading tackler. I'm pretty sure he's going to be one of their better defensive players this year. I'm not worried about that prediction. And Izzy Abanikanda, 8 carries for 15 yards. He didn't do a lot in the running game, but I'm pretty sure you'll take that touchdown he made. And that was a pretty impressive play. Pitman Zach 94 says they need to take away that penalty when the players are literally inches away from being on the sidelines and the offense snaps it. The defense gets called for too many players in the field. I think it was David Green or Tyler Bentley, one of the D tackles, was like running to the sideline and dove across tried to dive out of bounds to get back on the sideline. And they called him for being on the field, illegal substitution, too many men on the field. Make it like hockey. Hockey, as long as you're pretty much to the bench, you're okay. Just do it like hockey does. That cost Pitt, it was a 3rd down conversion, right? It was a 3rd and 3, and that penalty was a 5-yard penalty. So, I don't care for that. I don't understand the Devin Danielson penalty of, a delay of game on the defensive tackle. There were some weird calls out there. There were some non-calls that I didn't understand, and there were some questionable calls that were made. Scrolling through here. Panther Room says, big win, but if I had to be a Karen, my complaint is the quarterback and the kicker hold on to the ball way too long. Kedon Slovis is going to work on that. I don't think he did it every snap, but he had a few where he did hold on to the ball too long. I think he'll get more comfortable in the offense and do a better job of that going forward. And with the punter, with Sam Vanderhaar, like I said, that's, Pat Narduzzi, I think, called it artificial hang time, where part of the hang time, part of the time for the coverage unit to get downfield is that time that he spends rolling out. And so, yes and no. I think he's going to have to work on refining it and getting a little better at understanding when he needs to kick, that it's more important to get the kick up than to have the punt blocked. Or more important to get the kick up than it is to hold on to it too long and end up with the punt being blocked. I think that'll be a feeling out process too. Brock Madonic asks, who's your defensive and offensive players of the game? Well, I already said it. I think you probably could guess. I mean, Rodney Hammond for offense and John Morgan for defense. I think those guys had great games. They were the stars of the games. I don't think there's any question about it. And they played really well. Played really well. Matt P says, I don't know if it has any of the same effect on the team and the coaching staff, but this game and the way it played out was a real eye-opener, a game you totally expected to be in full control of. Yeah, the assumption that all the success was just going to seamlessly transition, continuing Matt's comment, the assumption that all the success was just going to seamlessly transition to this year was obviously a mistake. Not saying that they still won't compete for the ACC, but tonight was an eye-opener. I get that. I get that. I don't know. I didn't expect that it would seamlessly transition. As a matter of fact, I said a lot in the last couple of weeks that I thought it would be a sloppy game. Because it was the first game of the season. You are breaking in a new quarterback. You have a few starters at new positions. You have a new offensive coordinator. I thought it would be a sloppy game. I thought both sides would be a little bit sloppy, and I think at times they were. I think both teams had some sloppy errors. I don't think this is the finished product of this team. I don't know what I think is going to happen next week. Tennessee even play tonight. I don't even look at it. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I believe they played tonight. I assume they won. I wasn't really following along with that as the Pitt game was going on. We'll talk about that on subsequent Panther-Lair shows and morning Pitt episodes. But they're obviously going to have to be a lot better next week than they were this week. They're going to have to make some of those corrections. That old cliche about you make your biggest jump between week 1 and week 2. I mean that's got to happen. That's got to happen. But what I would say about it is this, and maybe this will be a good kind of final statement. What I would say about it is this. This was a game where they had a punt blocked. They missed a clear opportunity and an interception. They gave up 190 rushing yards. They never had a lead of more than 7 points. They trailed for a significant amount of the time. They were outgained by 20 yards. They allowed 50% third down conversion percentage. They gave up 5 scores in the red zone, 4 touchdowns in the red zone. They allowed 5 sacks. There's another one that I thought I wanted to say. Where is it? They committed 8 penalties. They had a turnover, lost a fumble. They did a lot of things that don't typically end up with a win. And they still were able to make the plays and come out with a victory. And some of it was a little fluky. The ball bounces off the wide receiver's hands and MJ Devonshire is right there to catch it. That's a little fluky. But the touchdown drive before that was not fluky. And the other offensive touchdowns that Pitt scored were not fluky. And there were some penalties here and there. West Virginia finished with 11 flags. But for the most part, I would say Pitt earned what they got tonight. They didn't play a perfect game. They played the kind of game that if they play that way next week against Tennessee, they're going to lose. If they play that way against Miami, they're going to lose. If they play that way against Louisville and North Carolina, they'll probably lose. And a bunch of teams on their schedule. But they still were able to come out with a win. And they showed enough promise, I think, between Kedon and Slovis, the good things that he did, with the playmakers that he has, the good things that those guys did, and then the defense. I'm not concerned about this defense against the run. They did not defend the run well tonight. I'm not concerned about that happening continuously over the course of the season. I don't think that all of a sudden in year 8, Pat Narduzzi's defense is going to become bad against the run. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll fix those problems. Pretty confident about that. I think we'll be back to complaining about the pass defense very soon. Sooner rather than later. I'm sure the Tennessee game will be back to complaining about the pass defense. Meanwhile, JT Daniels, who I thought looked pretty decent, goes 23 of 40 for 214, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. It's not a very good stat line. But that's what I would say about this game. They didn't play a perfect game, played a sloppy game in a lot of regards, did a lot of things that can lead to a loss. But they were able to pull out a victory. They were able to come out ahead and open the season 1-0. So now they move on to Tennessee with a perfect record. We'll see if they jump up a little bit in the polls. Number 17 in the AP preseason poll. We'll see kind of what happens to the teams around them. And we'll see if they move up. And then they'll move on to Tennessee. They have to be a lot better in week 2 than they were in week 1. I think they'll make improvements. Will they make enough to get a victory? We'll find out in about 8 days or so. For now, it's like 2:30 in the morning. I appreciate everybody who came out to the live stream tonight. I'm amazed at you guys' turnout. It's awesome that everybody came out. We got like close to 200 people watching this thing at 2:30 in the morning. You can't all be on the West Coast. Listen, if you're here, like this video. I really appreciate it when you do that. Hit the subscribe button. That's big for us too. But like the video if you're watching the video later. If you're watching it on Friday, leave some comments. And we always like to engage in that way. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. We'll be back, of course, on Monday morning with a new episode of the Morning Pit, where we'll be talking about everything that happened over the course of the weekend and more thoughts on the game and all that kind of stuff. Who knows, if I get bored here at some point this weekend, maybe I'll tape a new video and put that out. But I'm pretty sure this will be our final video content for the week. Pitt's 1-0, 38-31 over West Virginia in the return of the Backyard Brawl that, quite frankly, lived up to everything we said the Backyard Brawl was, would be, and should be. So, great return of the Brawl. Good win for Pitt. 1-0 on the season. And it's football. Football season is here, and it's back. Got off to quite a start tonight. Thanks again to everybody who came out on the live stream tonight. Really, it was fun. Probably could have gone for another hour or two, but it's like 2:30 in the morning, guys. We got to hang it up. So thanks again. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe. And make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. We're going to have lots of content there all throughout the weekend and heading into next week. So thanks again. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of the night. Have a great weekend. Get some sleep. And we'll talk to you Monday morning with the Morning Pit.